I'm Caroline, and I have been in the ZTA program for 3 months now.
What have you learned so far in your commercial training?
I'm about halfway through my flying and my commercial training, and I'm almost completely done with the ground. So commercial training is kind of like private training on steroids. You're really going in depth to why things are the way they are. It's not just surface level knowledge. You have to dig into the nitty gritty of weather. Why is the weather forming? The systems, aerodynamics, everything like that. So commercial is just a really in-depth look at flight training, and it's really, really interesting stuff to learn. I've really been enjoying getting to dive deeper into my aviation knowledge. I think the whole concept of flight is interesting. Like, it's absolutely insane. When I'm taking off, I'm still kind of in awe that I'm in this little metal box and I'm just soaring off the ground. I love being able to learn how thrust and drag and lift and, you know, being able to put all of that together and actually see it and feel it. And now that you're doing maneuvers in commercial, you know, in private, you're doing maneuvers to sort of learn the airplane and learn how to do it. But with commercial, you have to learn why, what forces are acting upon you in a steep turn, what's happening when you roll out of your steep turn. And once you kind of start to figure that out, it all clicks, and it just is pretty incredible once you really start to understand how all of this works.
So what can a pilot do with a commercial certificate? Well, with a commercial certificate, now you can finally get paid to fly an airplane and take other people other places. It's very nice once you can finally start making money and instead of paying money to fly airplanes. So what does the process look like for getting the commercial certificate? You are focusing on some new maneuvers that have to be done as part of the commercial rating. And there's also tighter standards when it comes to performing even the private level maneuvers. Whereas in private level slow flight, you have 100 feet of altitude that you can be above or below your starting altitude. Once you move on to the commercial rating and you're working towards that, the standards tighten down quite a bit. So now instead of 100 feet each side, you've got 50 feet that you can go above or below your starting altitude. The maneuvers that you're working on have some tighter restrictions. There are a couple new maneuvers like the power off 180. So as you go through the commercial course, you'll focus on perfecting those maneuvers, getting really proficient in them so that it's not an issue at all when it comes to performing them on the check ride. There's also some new regulations that come into play as a commercial pilot, such as when you can charge people to fly with you, when you have to have an operator certificate versus when you don't. So learning those new regulations and really getting into the weeds on what exactly you can and cannot be paid for as a pilot. A lot of it is time spent in the airplane, perfecting maneuvers, and then learning those new items on the ground as far as regulations. And then there's also a couple new systems that you learn more in depth that you didn't cover before in quite as much depth on perhaps the private rating, such as constant speed propellers or pressurization systems or oxygen systems. So those may be some things that you'll cover in a lot more depth once you move on to the commercial course.
I'm going to take the CFI route, and I'm going to get my CFI, CFII, and hopefully my MEI, and I'm going to build my way up to 1,500 hours, and I would like to go to the airlines. You know, of course, private training day one is, this is an airplane. You have to learn everything from your pre-flight checks to going through your checklist to what is a fuel sump, how do you use a fuel sump, you know, the basic things like that, all the way through to the, you know, the ground knowledge, the flying knowledge. You have to have some of those moments with your instructor in private training where they just say, you know, yank the yoke back, see what happens. You know, by commercial level, you know what happens if you yank the yoke back, but private is just zero. You know nothing, and you just have to start slowly building those blocks up to form a foundation of, you know, ground knowledge, flight knowledge, knowledge of the airplane that you're flying. So there's sort of that stress of this is completely new on top of the fact that you're learning to fly a freaking airplane. Like, it's a lot going on. And then Instrument is less focus on why the airplane works and things that you can do with the airplane, and more enhancing your safety, enhancing your situational awareness, getting more precise with, you know, your instrument knowledge and your ATC communications and things like that. And commercial is sort of a compound of all of that. Like, yes, we're operating under VFR when we do our commercial training, but after completing your instrument rating, you should have a better knowledge of weather. You should be better with your ATC communications. You know, when you're coming back into Addison and you've got to try and jump in with all those Southwest and Americans when you're on, you know, Dallas approach, you've got to be able to get your comms down. They need to be quick because they don't want to waste the time with you. They've got, you know, 100 other planes going on. So I think commercial is just, there's so much more expected of you, which there should be at this point from a private student to a commercial student, but you're ready for it. You know, you got that good foundation with private for why the airplane works, why it does what it does. And with instrument, you know, you get an even bigger understanding. So it's all just sort of compounded together.
So what are some challenges that commercial students typically face? Some of the bigger challenges that I see have to do with some of those newer maneuvers that commercial students are working on. The power off 180 is one that is tricky because every day the way you perform the power off 180 may change because you're going to have changing weather conditions, wind, air pressure, different things that affect the way the airplane flies. So learning how to manage the airplane and the energy in the wings so that you can get to a specific point on the runway without having the benefit of being able to add throttle at any point you want, it becomes a challenge. It really forces you to learn how the airplane flies. A lot of times during the commercial rating, students are also gearing up for the CFI rating. That's the next thing they typically transition into. And a lot of times they get behind prepping for that because they don't knock out the writtens when they have downtime. Their head's in one space, but you know, everything they're doing is in another. So it's easy to kind of not focus on the right things at the right time in the big picture scheme of things when they're looking at their overall commercial training.
It's gonna be probably the exact same thing that I said for instrument. Get your written done. Once you get your written done, then you can really dive deep into what I'm doing now. Is I got my 2023 FAR aim, so I'm going through and I'm tabbing that out. I'm getting all of that highlighted. I have my PHAC on my flying iPad and ForeFlight, so I'm going through and I'm bookmarking key things that I know I struggle with a little bit in my PHAC. And I think the basis of it is if you don't know something, that's fine. Know where to find it. So that's what I'm doing now, is I'm going through and I'm checking my own deficiencies and making sure that, you know, come check ride time, if there is a question that I don't know, I immediately know where to find it. So I would say just getting ready to be able to have all of your, you know, all of your knowledge tools tabbed, bookmarked, highlighted, ready to go, and get your written done. But other than that, I think commercial training is a blast and just enjoy it. So that's all for today on our intro to commercial pilot training. If you have any other questions for us, go ahead and comment down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for future videos.